Welcome to another bonus edition of Upon Further Review.
Upon further review,
And in this edition, we'll be talking about the Washington Redskins at the Minnesota Vikings. And you can catch this Week 9 matchup on November 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on your local Fox affiliates. So both of these teams have a record of 3-5 heading into this matchup. In Week 1, Washington went to Houston and they lost to the Texans. They then hosted Jacksonville in Week 2 and they picked up their first victory. They were at 500 at that point, but then they lost 4 games in a row. They went to Philadelphia and lost to the Eagles. Then they hosted the New York Giants and the Seattle Seahawks and they lost both of those games. They then went to Arizona and lost to the Cardinals. But then in Week 7, they picked up their second victory of the year as they beat the Tennessee Titans in Washington by 2 points. And then in Week 8 on Monday Night Football in prime time, they went to Dallas and they beat their division rivals, the Dallas Cowboys, in overtime by a field goal. And what a game that was. So that's how they got to 3-5, and now we look at Minnesota. They started off with a big win in Week 1 in St. Louis against the Rams, but then they lost the next 2 games as they hosted the Patriots in Week 2, and then they went to New Orleans in Week 3. But then they picked up their second victory of the year in Week 4 at home against Atlanta. But then in Week 5, they went to Green Bay on Thursday Night Football and got blown out by their division rivals. In Week 6, they ended up hosting the Lions, and they lost a very low-scoring defensive battle. Then in Week 7, they ended up going to Buffalo, and they lost a heartbreaker for Minnesota fans as they lost by just 1 point. When Sammy Watkins scored that touchdown there at the end of the game. They had that one right in their grasp, but it slipped right out of their hands at the end. And then in Week 8, though, they bounced back as they got their third victory of the season. They went down to Tampa Bay, and they won as they broke some hearts in that game. After having their hearts broken in Week 7, they broke the Tampa Bay fans' hearts with that game right there. It was a crazy finish. In overtime, on the first play of overtime, the rookie out of UCLA, Anthony Barr, scoops up the fumble and returns it. I think it was 27 yards for the touchdown on the first play of overtime for the victory. Just crazy. You never know what's going to happen in sports. That's what's so great about it. So there you go. Now we're in Week 9, and we got the Washington Redskins going to Minnesota to face the Vikings. These two teams, they're pretty evenly matched as the records obviously indicate. And let's look at their injury reports. There was some word that RG3 would make a start in this game. Although Colt McCoy did lead them to that huge win over Dallas. He did participate, fully in the practice this week. But from what I'm hearing, Colt McCoy is going to start. But it's kind of, who knows, we'll see. We won't really know until the game actually starts which way are they going. But from the word I'm seeing is that it's going to be Colt McCoy. Although all week long I had been hearing just RG3, RG3, RG3. So we'll see when it comes to actual game time who takes that first snap under center. Either way, though, I don't think it'll make a big difference. At least it's not going to make much of a difference for who I think is going to win. I think it's going to be Minnesota, mainly because it's in Minnesota. If it was in Washington, I'd probably pick the Redskins. It's in Minnesota, though, and I'm going with the Vikings. And for the Vikings, they have a little bit of people banged up, but not too much. Nothing really worth really getting to it. I mean, yeah, you can get into all of it, but no really huge, big name people that are going to be out for this one, except for Kyle Rudolph, the tight end. He is out, but everybody else, they were full participants. And if somebody's full participant, for the most part, I expect them to play. Of course, in the RG3's case, that's a different matter because it'll come down to, who's the starter. If he was a different position, he'd probably be making an appearance, and maybe he does make an appearance if Colt's struggling, if he doesn't get the start, or vice versa. We shall see. But let's look inside the numbers for these two teams, and when it comes to passing proficiency, the Washington Redskins are 5th in the NFL in passing yards per game. The Minnesota Vikings are 31st. So that's the numbers right there on offense. And on defense, Washington is 7th and Minnesota is 4th. So the advantage in the passing game goes to Washington, although we don't even know who's going to be behind center. But either way, regardless of who's behind center, they put up yards. That's the thing that's so crazy. They've had 3 different quarterbacks this season, and somehow they're 5th in offensive yards per game. How about that one? Just crazy thing about numbers. But passing defense, though, both of these teams are in the top 10. The Vikings are in the top 5. They've been getting at quarterbacks. That's the strength of their team, has been their pass defense. So going up against the Redskins, that should be an interesting matchup. But the fact that Minnesota struggled so much to pass the ball, of course, a lot of that has to do with the injuries. They've also had 3 quarterbacks behind centers. Matt Castle went down. We saw Christian Ponder even in a little bit, and mainly Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater really is the future there in Minnesota, but he's also been injured as well. So advantage Redskins in the passing game. And in the running game, Washington is 19th against the run, or they're 19th in running yards on the ground on offense, and Minnesota is 11th. When it comes to defense, Washington is 17th against the run. Minnesota is 16th against the run. So when it comes to the running game, the advantage is with Minnesota. Last year, the Redskins were running the ball really good. They do have Alfred Morris, but this year they're struggling to run the ball. They also don't really do much of a job of stopping the run either. They're middle of the road. So is the Vikings defense too. But the Vikings have actually been putting up yards on the ground. Asiata, he's been kind of having some injury problems too, but he's back to being healthy. But Jerick McKinnon, he's really been the bright spot for Minnesota. Asiata, he's more the power guy who just pounds the ball, gets it in the end zone. But Jerick McKinnon, he's a little more finesse. He's been, doing the thing there in Minnesota. So he's been kind of a bright spot for the Vikings. And we saw, he had 103 yards against Buffalo in that loss. But last week in the win, he had 83 yards. And he even had 100 yards. 135 yards against Atlanta back in week 4. So Jerick McKinnon, if he can run the ball, they should have some success. Also, let's look at the points for and against. When it comes to points scored, the Redskins are 23rd. The Vikings are 29th. When it comes to points allowed, Washington is 22nd, Minnesota 12th. So when it comes to scoring, I'm going to give the edge to Minnesota because of their defense. Overall, their defense is pretty good. They do allow some yards on the ground, but they do not let teams into the end zone that often. They usually make teams settle for field goals, and that's what's probably going to happen here. We're going to be seeing Kai Forbath, and we'll also see Blair Walsh. They'll be out there kicking field goals, and this should be a low-scoring game potentially. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being like 9-6, something like that, 12-9, 15-9. Who knows? We maybe 16-10. Who knows? Something like that. On the other hand, you never know. Maybe these teams start, getting things moving. And against Washington, Minnesota, if they get it going, potentially, Teddy Bridgewater could have a big game. And then, they could run up the score there at home, give the Minnesota fans something to cheer about. Either way, I think they will win this game, although I do see it being more of a defensive battle. But don't be surprised if they start getting things going and put up some points too, But either way, I see the Vikings winning this one. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Very interested to read your thoughts and opinions. And if you enjoyed this show, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want more of this content, go ahead and subscribe as we bring you upon further reviews and recaps for each and every single game throughout the NFL football season, all the way through the playoffs. Just got done covering the baseball playoffs, so make sure to check that out if you like baseball. So we went over all the games, did recaps for all of them throughout the baseball playoffs. It was very exciting. The Giants are now world champions. I mean, it's not often that you see 2 wild card teams make it all the way to the World Series. And the Giants now won their 3rd out of 5. And congratulations to them. So thank you very much for listening. It has been greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and have a great weekend and enjoy all of the sports.